The crystalline spires of the Earth Andromerian Research Station gleamed against the backdrop of Jupiter's swirling storms. Lyra adjusted her environmental suit's temperature controls, her iridescent skin shimming with subtle patterns of anxiety. As the station's leading xenobiologist, she had worked with humans before, but today's project was different. They were attempting something unprecedented, combining Andromerian regenerative technology with human genetic engineering. The laboratory doors whispered open, revealing James Harrison, Earth's top researcher in xenobiology. His tall frame carried an air of quiet confidence, and his dark eyes held the same curiosity that had drawn Lyra to science years ago. She noticed how he moved with practiced ease in the low gravity, suggesting years of space station experience. "Dr. Lyra," he greeted her with a slight bow, a gesture that showed his familiarity with Andromerian customs. "The preliminary results from yesterday's trials are fascinating. The human tissue samples showed a 300% increase in regeneration speed when exposed to your crystalline matrices." Lyra's skin rippled with patterns of scientific excitement, a display that didn't go unnoticed by James. Over the past 3 months of collaboration, he had become adept at reading her species' biological responses. "Indeed, Dr. Harrison. But I'm more intrigued by how the matrices adapted to human cellular structures. It's unprecedented." They worked side by side, their movements synchronized through months of practice. James prepared the human tissue samples while Lyra calibrated the crystalline matrix generators. The air hummed with the sound of advanced equipment and the subtle resonance of Andromerian technology. "There's something else," Lyra said, her voice carrying the musical undertones characteristic of her species. "The matrices aren't just adapting to human cells. They're learning from them. Look at these pattern formations." James leaned closer to the holographic display, his shoulder nearly touching hers. The proximity sent an unexpected wave of resonance through Lyra's crystalline biology, something she had never experienced before. She pushed the sensation aside, focusing on the data. "This is revolutionary," James whispered, his eyes wide as he studied the results. "The implications for medical science, for both our species." Their breakthrough was interrupted by a sudden tremor that shook the station. Warning lights flashed as the station's AI announced, "Warning. Gravitational anomaly detected. All personnel proceed to emergency stations." James immediately reached for Lyra as another tremor threatened to knock them off their feet. His touch sent another wave of resonance through her system, stronger this time. The laboratory equipment began to shake violently, and the crystalline matrices started to destabilize. "The containment field is failing," Lyra shouted over the alarms. She rushed to the control panel, her fingers dancing over the holographic interfaces. If these matrices decompress explosively, the reaction could breach the station's hull. James was already moving, pulling up emergency protocols on his terminal. "We need to stabilize them manually. The automated systems aren't responding fast enough." They worked in perfect synchronization, their previous months of collaboration paying off in this critical moment. Lyra channeled her natural ability to resonate with crystalline structures, while James modified the containment algorithms in real time. As they fought to prevent disaster, neither noticed how the unstable matrices were affecting the environment around them. Microscopic crystals filled the air, carrying strands of both human and Andromerian genetic material. In their focused state, both scientists unknowingly inhaled these particles, setting in motion changes that would challenge both their worlds. Finally, the tremors subsided, and the matrices stabilized. The emergency lights faded, replaced by the standard illumination. Lyra and James stood in the aftermath, both breathing heavily from the intensity of the moment. "That was," James started. "Unexpected," Lyra finished, noticing again how her biology seemed to resonate with his presence. She ran a quick diagnostic on her environmental suit, but it showed no damage or contamination. The station's AI announced, "Gravitational anomaly contained. All personnel report status to central control." As they began documenting the incident, neither scientist realized they had just participated in the first successful merger of human and andromerian biology within their own bodies. The consequences of this would soon shake the foundations of both their civilizations. Looking at the scattered equipment and data readings, Lyra felt something had fundamentally changed. Her scientific mind began cataloging the subtle differences in her biological responses, while a deeper instinct told her that her life's path had just been irrevocably altered. James caught her eye, and for a moment, they shared a look of understanding. Whatever had happened here today, they would face the consequences together, as scientists and as friends. Little did they know, their partnership would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The weeks following the gravitational anomaly brought subtle but undeniable changes. Lyra noticed it first in her laboratory work. Her crystalline resonance patterns had shifted, becoming more complex, more human. She kept her observations private, documenting everything with scientific precision, while trying to suppress the growing anxiety that rippled through her iridescent skin. The medical bay's isolation chamber provided privacy as she reviewed her latest test results. Her body's crystalline matrix was transforming, incorporating elements of human cellular structure. But it was the second discovery that made her hands tremble. Within her, a new life was forming, an impossible hybrid of human and andromerian biology. "Computer, run diagnostic sequence Delta 7 again," she commanded, her musical voice tight with tension. The results remained unchanged. She was carrying a child, James's child, though such a thing should have been biologically impossible. The door chimed, interrupting her thoughts. "Lyra, the council representatives have arrived early." It was James, his voice carrying a note of concern. Their research had drawn increasing attention from both human and andromerian authorities, though neither of them had revealed the full extent of their breakthrough. "I'll be right there," she responded, quickly encrypting her personal medical data. She hadn't told James yet, couldn't tell him, not until she understood what was happening to her own body. The conference room was filled with tension when she arrived. 3 andromerian council members, their skin patterns displaying formal authority, sat across from 2 human officials from the Earth Science Directory. James stood at the presentation screen, his casual stance belying the diplomatic tightrope they were walking. "As you can see," James was saying, "the potential medical applications are extraordinary. The modified crystalline matrices could revolutionize human tissue regeneration." "And the risks?" demanded Counselor Verix, his skin patterns pulsing with skepticism. "These matrices are fundamental to our biology. Sharing this technology could expose our people to progress." Lyra interrupted, stepping forward. "Our species have maintained careful distance for decades. Perhaps it's time for that to change." She felt James's eyes on her, noting how her own skin patterns were displaying unusually emphatic colors. The human official, Director Russell, leaned forward. "The Council's concerns about genetic privacy are noted, but surely." A wave of dizziness hit Lyra suddenly, causing her skin to flare with unexpected brilliance. She steadied herself against the table, aware of the alarmed reactions from both humans and andromerians. First, Scientist Lyra. Counselor Verix stood, his patterns showing concern and suspicion. "Your resonance is highly irregular. Have you been exposed to contamination?" James moved toward her, but the council members were faster. "She must return to Andromeria immediately for examination," Verix declared. "These variations could indicate dangerous genetic instability." "I'm fine," Lyra insisted, but her skin betrayed her, rippling with patterns of distress that any Andromerian could read. She saw the moment James recognized something was seriously wrong, saw him take a step toward her despite the rising tension in the room. "This session is adjourned," Verix announced. "First, Scientist Lyra will return with us to Andromeria. All research materials will be sequestered pending investigation." "Now wait just a minute," James protested, but Director Russell gripped his arm in warning. "The Council has authority in matters of Andromerian biological security. Russell reminded him quietly. Don't make this an diplomatic incident. Lyra met James's eyes across the room, seeing the confusion and concern there. She wanted to tell him everything. About the changes in her body, about the impossible life growing inside her, about how her entire biology now seemed attuned to his presence. Instead, she straightened her posture and said formally, "The Council is correct. I should return to Andromeria for examination." The next hours passed in a blur of preparations and medical scans. The Council members kept her isolated, their patterns showing increasing alarm as preliminary readings confirmed genetic anomalies. Lyra knew what they would find, and what it would mean. Her people's laws about genetic purity were absolute. She managed one moment alone with James before boarding the Andromerian vessel. Whatever they find, she told him quietly, remember that our work was important. And right. Lyra, what's really going on? He reached for her hand but stopped short, aware of the watching council members. Her skin rippled with patterns of affection and regret that she knew he couldn't read. The universe is full of impossible things, James. Sometimes they're beautiful. She pressed a data crystal into his palm, letting her fingers linger against his for a moment. If anything happens, this will help you understand. She boarded the ship without looking back, her mind already racing through possibilities and plans. The council would discover her condition soon enough, and their reaction was predictable. She had perhaps days before they would attempt to correct the genetic anomaly, killing the impossible life growing within her. As the ship broke orbit, Lyra watched Earth disappear beneath them. Her hand rested protectively over her abdomen, where human and Andromerian DNA were weaving together in defiance of everything both species thought they knew about biology. She had always been a scientist first, driven by data and logic. But now, feeling the resonance of the new life within her, she knew she would become something else entirely. A fugitive, a pioneer, a mother. The stars stretched before her, holding both threat and promise. She would find a way back to Earth, back to James. But first, she had to survive what waited for her on Andromeria. The medical facility on Andromeria loomed before Lyra, its crystalline architecture, usually beautiful, now seeming cold and threatening. 3 weeks of tests and isolation had confirmed her fears. The council was preparing to purify her genetic code, a process that would terminate her pregnancy. In her private chamber, Lyra's fingers flew over the facility's control interface. Her status as first scientist still granted her access to certain systems, though she knew that wouldn't last long. The genetic scan results on her display told an extraordinary story. The hybrid child within her was perfectly viable, its DNA a harmonious blend of both species that should have been impossible. Security breach in Sector 7. The facility's AI announced suddenly. Lyra smiled grimly. Her programmed distraction was working. She had spent days carefully laying the groundwork for this moment, using her knowledge of Andromerian systems to create a series of cascading false alarms. She pressed her hand against the crystalline wall, using her altered biology to interface with the structure. The wall resonated differently now, responding to both her Andromerian patterns and the new human elements in her genetic code. A hidden door slid open, revealing a maintenance tunnel. Warning: unauthorized access detected in medical containment. The AI's voice echoed through the corridors. Lyra moved swiftly, her scientist's robes discarded for a maintenance worker's outfit. The child within her seemed to pulse with energy, affecting her crystalline biology in ways that actually helped mask her life signs from the facility's sensors. She reached the lower levels just as the facility went into full lockdown. Emergency barriers began crystallizing across corridors, but Lyra's hybrid biology allowed her to pass through them in ways pure Andromerians couldn't. The genetic changes that the Council feared had become her salvation. The maintenance shaft led to an underground transport hub. Lyra accessed the system with codes she carefully gathered over the past weeks. A small transport pod was waiting, programmed with a route that would take her to the spaceport. As she settled into the pod, Her hand rested on her abdomen, feeling the unique resonance of the life within her. "Your father would have so many questions about how you're possible," she whispered. The thought of James gave her renewed determination. The data crystal she'd given him would have revealed her condition by now. She hoped he understood why she'd had to keep it secret initially. The transport pod emerged in the spaceport's cargo sector. Lyra moved with purpose, her altered skin patterns mimicking those of a routine cargo worker. She had timed her escape perfectly. A supply ship was preparing for launch, heading to one of the outer colonies that still traded with humans. Alarms began blaring throughout the spaceport. All departures suspended. The announcement echoed. Medical quarantine in effect. Lyra quickened her pace. The supply ship's cargo hold was already sealed, but her enhanced connection to Andromerian technology let her slip through the crystalline barrier. Inside the hold, she quickly located the secure container she'd arranged through a series of anonymous transactions. It would shield her life signs during the journey, though the hours in such confined space would be challenging. As she sealed herself inside, she felt the ship's engines powering up. The captain, eager to meet delivery schedules, was ignoring the departure ban. Lyra allowed herself a small smile. Even on Andromeria, profit sometimes outweighed regulations. The journey passed in cycles of discomfort and meditation. Lyra used the time to study the data she'd smuggled out about her condition. The way human and Andromerian DNA had merged within her was revolutionary. Her child wasn't just a hybrid, it represented a perfect synthesis of both species' strengths. After 3 days, she felt the ship dock at the outer colony's port. This was the most dangerous part of her plan. She emerged from the container, her body stiff but functional. The cargo hold's door responded to her touch, crystalline structures recognizing her hybrid biology as having authority even though her credentials had been revoked. The colony port was chaos, perfect for disappearing into the crowd. Lyra made her way to the commercial sector, where she had arranged passage on a human trading vessel through a series of encrypted communications. The captain was one of the few humans who regularly dealt with the outer colonies, and his ship had been modified to accommodate both species. "You must be my special passenger," a voice said behind her. Lyra turned to find a weathered human man watching her with shrewd eyes. "Captain Reeves, your friend paid well for discretion." "Friend?" Lyra's skin patterns shifted with surprise. Reeves handed her a small data chip. Message came with a payment. Said you'd understand when you saw it. The chip contained only a few words, but they made her crystalline matrix pulse with joy. "The impossible is only the undiscovered. Come home. J." Somehow, James had found a way to help her, even across the vast distance between their worlds. As she boarded the trading vessel that would take her back toward Earth space, Lyra felt the child within her respond to her emotions, its unique energy signature growing stronger. She had escaped Andromeria, but the journey was far from over. Both Earth and Andromerian authorities would be looking for her now. Yet for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Lyra felt hope. She wasn't just running from something. She was running toward a future that could change both their species forever. The trading vessel broke orbit, its course set for the frontier between human and Andromerian space. In her cabin, Lyra began composing a message to James, explaining everything she'd discovered about their child's unique genetic structure. Their work had unlocked something profound, not just about biology, but about the very nature of their species' potential for unity. As the stars streaked past, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future where her child could exist freely, a living bridge between two worlds that had always seen their differences as barriers. First, though, she had to make it back to Earth, and she knew the hardest part of her journey still lay ahead. The abandoned research outpost on Europa's ice-covered surface provided the perfect meeting place. James paced the station's main laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays of Lyra's genetic scans. The data she'd given him before leaving had led him down a rabbit hole of discovery that challenged everything both species thought they knew about their biological compatibility. "You're sure about this?" Dr. Rosalind Reed, his former mentor and one of the few people he trusted with the truth, studied the genetic analysis with growing amazement. Her silver hair reflected the blue glow of Europa's ice visible through the reinforced windows. "The evidence is undeniable," James replied, pulling up another hologram. "Look at these genetic markers. They're not just compatible, they're complementary, almost as if they were designed to work together." A musical voice finished. They turned to find Lyra standing in the doorway, her iridescent skin glowing softly in the dim light. Despite the months of separation, her presence still affected James in ways he couldn't quite explain. Dr. Reed moved forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming any initial shock at the obvious changes in Lyra's appearance. The Andromerian's crystalline biology now displayed subtle patterns that seemed almost human, while maintaining its alien beauty. "The pregnancy is progressing well?" Reed asked, already reaching for her scanning equipment. Lyra nodded, allowing the elderly scientist to take readings. "The child grows stronger each day. But it's more than that. The changes in my biology, they've revealed something our people have hidden for generations." James brought up the ancient text he'd discovered buried in Earth's earliest archaeological records. "It's not just your biology that's changing, Lyra. Look at this." The holographic display showed cave paintings from Earth's distant past, drawings that clearly depicted beings with crystalline patterns in their skin. "Impossible," Lyra whispered, but her skin patterns betrayed her excitement. "These are dated. Over 50,000 years ago," James confirmed. Humanity's ancestors didn't just know about Andromerians. They were working with them, maybe even breeding with them. Dr. Reed finished, studying her scan results. "The genetic markers in your child aren't new at all. They're recessive traits, dormant in both species for millennia. Your accident in the lab didn't create something new. It awakened something old." Lyra's hand moved to her abdomen, where the hybrid child grew. "The council must have known. That's why they were so afraid. Our species aren't meant to be separate at all. We're meant to be together." A warning alarm cut through the revelation. Dr. Reed moved to the security console, her expression grim. "We've got incoming vessels, both Earth security and Andromerian ships." "How did they find us?" James demanded, already moving to secure their research data. "They didn't," Lyra said quietly. "I led them here." At their shocked expressions, she continued, "This truth needs to be revealed, not just to a few scientists in a hidden lab, but to both our species." James understood then. Lyra hadn't come just to hide or escape. She'd come to change everything. The child she carried wasn't just their child. It was living proof of a connection both species had forgotten. "The station's defenses won't hold them for long," Dr. Reed warned, watching the approaching ships on the tactical display. "They don't need to," Lyra said. Her skin began to glow with an intensity James had never seen before. The crystalline structures throughout the station responded, resonating with her enhanced biology. "The station itself is built with the same technology our ancestors shared, technology that responds to both human and Andromerian commands." She pressed her hand against a wall panel, and suddenly the entire station hummed with power. Ancient systems, dormant for millennia, began to awaken. Through the windows, they could see the ice of Europa responding, crystalline structures growing and shifting in patterns that matched Lyra's skin. "It's not just this station," James realized, watching the readings. "There's a network, isn't there? Hidden bases all through the solar system, left by our ancestors. Places where our species work together, live together, love together." Lyra confirmed, "until something made them stop, made them forget. But our child remembers. The genetic memory of both species, awakened and combined." The approaching ships had slowed, clearly detecting the massive energy signatures now emanating from Europa's surface. Both Earth and Andromerian authorities would have to acknowledge what was happening here. "They'll still try to stop this," Dr. Reed warned. Both sides have too much invested in keeping our species separate. Let them try, Lyra said, her voice carrying new strength. The child within her pulsed with energy, connecting to the ancient network in ways even she didn't fully understand. The truth can't be hidden any longer. James moved to stand beside her, feeling the strange resonance between them grow stronger. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The child they had created wasn't an aberration. It was a reminder of what both their species were always meant to be. Through the station's windows, Europa's ice continued to transform, revealing structures and secrets buried for thousands of years. The truth of their shared past was literally emerging from the ice, and neither Earth nor Andromeria could ignore it now. The confrontation they had feared was coming, but it would be on their terms. With the ancient technology awakening around them, they had a chance to force both sides to acknowledge the reality that the future of both species lay not in separation, but in reunion. The ancient control chamber beneath Europa's surface pulsed with crystalline light, responding to both Lyra's transformed biology and the hybrid life growing within her. On the monitors above, two fleets faced each other, Earth's sleek metallic ships and the crystalline vessels of Andromeria. Between them, the research station had become a beacon, broadcasting the truth about their shared history to both civilizations. "They're receiving the data," Dr. Reed confirmed, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls. "Every ship, every command center, every major population center, they're all seeing the evidence." James watched Lyra as she communicated with the ancient systems, her skin patterns flowing with colors he'd never seen before. The child within her had become a conduit, connecting them to technologies that had waited millennia to be rediscovered. "Security teams are boarding the upper levels," he reported, checking the station's sensors. "Both human and Andromerian forces." "Let them come," Lyra said calmly. "They need to see this with their own eyes." Her hand rested on a crystalline pillar, and more hidden chambers began to illuminate around them, revealing vast archives of their species' shared past. The first security teams found them surrounded by holographic displays of ancient civilizations, where humans and Andromerians had lived together. Cities that combined crystalline technology with human innovation. Families that blended both species' strengths. "Stand down and surrender for quarantine," the Earth security commander ordered, while her Andromerian counterpart's skin displayed patterns of rigid authority. "There will be no more quarantine," Lyra declared, her voice carrying new power. "No more separation. Look around you. This is who we were meant to be." She gestured and new holograms sprang to life, showing genetic sequences that proved the deliberate division of their species. "Our ancestors didn't drift apart," James explained, standing beside her. "They were driven apart. By fear, by those who thought our differences made us weak rather than strong." He pulled up the final piece of evidence they'd discovered, records of the ancient conflict that had led to the Great Separation. Dr. Reed stepped forward, her scientific authority adding weight to their words. "The genetic markers that make our species compatible weren't lost. They were suppressed, generation after generation, carefully bred out of both populations. Until now, the security teams wavered as the evidence mounted around them. Through their communications, they could hear the growing reaction from both fleets above. The truth was spreading, impossible to contain. Lyra suddenly gasped, her hand going to her abdomen. The child within her pulsed with unprecedented energy, and the entire chamber responded. The ancient technology synchronized with the hybrid life force, creating a display more powerful than anything they planned. Every person in the room, human and Andromerian alike, felt the connection. Genetic memories, locked away for thousands of years, began to surface. They remembered not just their separation, but the harmony that had come before. "This is what they tried to make us forget," Lyra said softly, her voice carrying to everyone. "Not just that we could live together, but that we were stronger together, each species completing what the other lacked." The Andromerian security commander's skin patterns shifted from authority to awe. The Earth commander slowly lowered her weapon. Above them, the fleets began to move, not to attack, but to take up protective positions around the station. "The Council is requesting an emergency session," the Andromerian commander reported, his patterns showing confusion and wonder. They're acknowledging the evidence. "Earth Command is doing the same," his human counterpart added. "They're calling for immediate diplomatic contact to discuss reunification protocols." James moved to support Lyra as the energy surge subsided. The child had settled again, but its impact would ripple through both civilizations forever. The truth couldn't be buried again. "What happens now?" Dr. Reed asked, looking at the incredible array of ancient knowledge surrounding them. "Now we rebuild," Lyra said, looking at James with patterns of love that he had finally learned to read perfectly. "Not just diplomatic relations or scientific cooperation. We rebuild the connection that was always meant to exist between our peoples." The security teams began to withdraw. Their mission changed from capture to protection. Above them, messages flew between the fleets as both sides struggled to adjust to a reality that had been hidden for millennia. "It won't be easy," James warned, thinking of the centuries of separation and prejudice they would need to overcome. Lyra's skin rippled with determination and hope. "Nothing worth doing ever is. But our child won't grow up in a divided world. They'll know the strength that comes from unity, from embracing all parts of their heritage." The ancient chamber continued to pulse with light, its crystalline structures resonating with the promise of a future that their ancestors had once dreamed of. A future where humanity and Andromeria could grow together again, their differences becoming sources of strength rather than division. Dr. Reed began organizing teams to study the vast archive they discovered, while above them, the first tentative steps toward reunification were already beginning. The child that had started it all grew peaceful within Lyra, its unique genetic heritage, no longer a source of fear, but a beacon of hope. "Together?" James asked, taking Lyra's hand as they prepared to face the challenges ahead. Her skin patterns danced with joy and love as she replied, "Together, as we were always meant to be." The ancient chamber seemed to sing around them, celebrating the return of harmony between two peoples who had been apart for far too long. The future they had dreamed of wasn't just possible, it was finally, after thousands of years, beginning again.